Super excited to be here in front of you, although virtually. Would have loved to do this in person. And I hope you enjoyed the various sessions that we have planned for you today. So if at the start of the year, I had told you that we would be attending a virtual event, sitting around on virtual tables, listening to sessions on a virtual stage, while being stuck at our homes in front of our laptops, you all would have laughed at me. But here we are, doing the unthinkable. When this pandemic started, I, like so many else, thought all would be back to normal in a couple of months. And in the worst case, we would be back to offices before the end of the year. Actually, I was hoping for September. And the truth is, we are towards the end of the third quarter, and no one has any clue when things are going back to normal. In fact, we don't even know if there's any normal to go back to. But it just amazes me that billions of people all across the world have found a way to combat this pseudo social isolation. And we continue to march forward with our masks and our 6 feet distances. While I would still like to believe that the change that we have seen in our personal lives is largely temporary, I strongly believe that the way we work has altered irreversibly. So maybe in our personal lives, we may go back to what we were doing earlier, going on holidays and doing everything that we used to do. But the way we work has changed forever. The notion of a workplace, the methods of collaboration, and the way of doing business will never go back to what it was. And recruiting is no different. In the recent past, there have been some trends that have emerged that have changed the way that we recruit. And if we don't adapt to them, and frankly, I believe these are trends that if we don't adapt to them, we won't be able to win the war for talent. Some of these trends have emerged because of COVID, and some otherwise. In today's session, I want to talk about four things that we've closely observed over the last many months and have developed a strong hypothesis around. And I would love to share that knowledge with you. Note that some of these trends, merit a discussion on their own and could take hours. So I'll be touching upon all of them briefly and kind of sharing my thoughts. We also have, Q&A, time for Q&A within the session. So please feel free to post your questions on chat. I will not be taking questions while I'm going through the presentation, but we will have time towards the end, and that's when we can answer questions. So the first one is obvious. It's a no-brainer. Recruiting has irreversibly become remote first. And there are obviously, while there are challenges to implement a remote first recruiting process, there are obviously benefits that one can get from moving to a remote first recruiting process. For instance, instead of having to bring candidates from all over the country, if by moving the process online translates into massive savings in terms of cost savings in terms of the logistics. And second, of course, with everything virtual, there is also an opportunity to reduce the time to hire. Scheduling interviews becomes a lot better, a lot easier when one doesn't have to work around complex travel schedules. So obviously, just by the merit of moving to a remote first or a completely virtual recruiting process, we have both the opportunity to reduce the time to hire as well as the opportunity to reduce our costs. But those are just, I would say, those are just the tangible benefits. There are tons of intangible benefits that one can gain by moving to a remote first process. And that, in my opinion, are more valuable. But let's look at first what a remote hiring process looks like. Because we're going remote first, there is a significant opportunity for us to widen our sourcing funnel, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Of course, post the sourcing funnel, there is the step of a screening or implementing an accurate and objective screening process, and then of course there are the interviewing stages. So this is not any different from what you would do in a traditional recruiting process, but as you can see, each of these components have been are getting changed because we are going remote first. So in terms of when it comes to sourcing, you want to source wide. When it comes to screening, you want to have an accurate screening process that reduces the volume of applicants at the interviewing stage. And when it comes to interviews, we actually have an opportunity to implement a more unbiased interviewing process. And let me, unpack that a little bit more. So let's talk about sourcing wide. I think it's a great time to answer some of these questions. Why do I need to source candidates from my city? If your organization is not or has not already declared that they're going to be working remotely even after the pandemic ends, I'm very confident that every organization around the world is at least open to working remotely partly. It's not necessarily the entire workforce works remotely, but I'm sure everyone, all of us, will be a lot more open to hiring remote workers. And even if we forget remote workers for a moment, even if we all believe, even if some of us believe that we are going to go back to our offices and everybody will be co-located, it still begets a question: why do I need to source candidates from the same city that I've done? Why do I need to visit the same set of schools? Can I actually look at more diverse talent by implementing a wider sourcing strategy? Let's look at university recruiting for a moment. Because today, because of COVID, we cannot physically visit the same set of schools like we have done year on year. It actually presents us an opportunity to break through the constraints that we have put on ourselves and say, instead of going to the same set of schools virtually, can I now actually cast a wider net? Can I look at universities that I have not looked at before? And of course, there are certain process challenges that come with it, but those, in my opinion, are all problems, good problems to solve. With COVID, there is a significant increase in applicant volume for any role that is open today. And I think this as a trend in tech recruiting, traditionally tech recruiting has been, at least in markets like the Bay Area, on the East Coast, have been a supply constrained ecosystem. But I think if we all are open to working remotely, if we all become open to looking at unconventional sources of talent, we can actually balance out the equation. It doesn't have to be a demand driven ecosystem, but at least it can be a little bit more balanced than what it is today. And what that means is we are bound to see, not only during COVID, which we're already seeing, but even after this, we're bound to see an increase in the applicant volume for any given role. And that obviously poses a challenge for recruiting teams, because with a higher applicant volume, if you still want to maintain the same time to close, the same time to offer, and you want to maintain a quality benchmark, you need to have processes that help you objectively screen candidates. And that's where, if you've not already put in an objective screening process, we strongly recommend it's the right time to do it. It not only helps you manage a high volume of applicant, but it also ensures that your screening process right at the top is as much as possible bias free. And the last process, in any interviewing process is interviewing. And while we all agree that remote hiring means that interviews need to happen online, and we'll all say that we all feel that conducting interviews over a video call is just not the same as doing it face to face. There's no human connect, there's no body language. Well, all of that is understandable. At the same time, just like every challenge presents an opportunity, I think even in interviewing, this pandemic presents us an opportunity to actually make the interview experience better from a candidate point of view, and definitely more applicable in case of tech recruiting, and not only a better experience but also make it more unbiased and objective. And why I say that is, if you look at the traditional interviewing process, which happens face to face, typically there is no record of what happened during the interview. There's no way for recruiting teams or even hiring managers to go back and introspect as to how did the interview go. Because we are conducting these interviews virtually, we now have an data. We now have data to go back to and see what are we doing wrong in our interviews. And not just that, the unconscious biases that exist, or are amplified when we see people, when we meet face to face, they actually reduce over a virtual video call, because it's not the same as you're meeting a person face to face. So as I said, of course, conducting interviews over a video are hard, but at the same time, it also presents an opportunity for us. So what this means is, as we think about going virtual and going remote, recruiting teams all over the world have been restructuring the tools and processes as a response to this pandemic. But those who are redesigning their orgs for remote first hiring process, even when the pandemic ends, I believe they will have a long-term edge over the others. The second trend that I want to talk about is the move to a skill-based recruiting process. And let me step back a little bit. One of the biggest changes that have happened in the last few years is the democratization of computer science education. Universities no longer have the monopoly on creation of a skilled workforce, at least when it comes to software development as a career. As long as one has a laptop and an internet connection, they can learn to code irrespective of what's the background and what part of the world they are in. And what that means is, what all of this means, that the fact that universities do not today have a monopoly on generating a skilled workforce, that the traditional university education system is changing, it means that the method of recruiting, which has mostly so far depended on pedigree as a signal of competency is no more applicable. It doesn't really matter what school you've gone to or where you've worked, as long as one can demonstrate their skill sets and they can show that they are a fit for the job. That's what all it matters. The world, in my opinion, has already moved to a skills first economy, and I have some data points for you to share with you. But and the organizations which will have to follow suit sooner rather than later. So let's look at some data. COVID-19 has already flipped the traditional university education system on its head. Point in case being, millions of students are completing their coursework remotely through online curriculums. And the fact is that for all major universities, these curriculums were already available online, not just for that university, but elsewhere as well. So what that means is if there is a student who's graduating from MIT today, studying online, there is another student who has gone through the same MIT course, just not at MIT. So if the content and the content delivery method is the same for a person graduating from an MIT and a person going through the same course structure, same delivery method outside of MIT, you tell me how much of a difference would you have between the two of them? I think that's a question that we all need to think about deeper. The modern MOOC movement has today reached 110 million learners in just 8 years. MOOCs became a reality sometime around 2011, and since then we've already churned out 110 million learners. What that means is there are potentially 110 million more working professionals who don't need who don't come from traditional backgrounds or have gone through conventional education, but they are very much employable. And lastly, and this is from a developer survey by Stack Overflow, only one third of the developers who took this survey felt that formal education is very important in today's time. So it's not just the people who are graduating, but people who have also gone through formal education. They too feel that the value of going through a university education system in the traditional sense is limited. So what that means is for all of us, our recruiting processes need to change. If we truly want to embrace this move to skills first recruiting process, then we have the opportunity to make our hiring process a lot more objective and bias free. We have the opportunity to source from a much wider pool. We have an opportunity to really hire people for their capabilities. And I think we all struggle with the roles that we find hard to fill. I think if we take a skill based approach, if we are willing to widen our sourcing funnel, if we are willing to focus on just the competencies that are needed for the job and not look at the traditional signals that today, in today's world are irrelevant, I think we would have solved part of the problems that we've created for ourselves. And what this really means is that right from sourcing till the final interview, the recruiting process has to be focused on assessing skills, and everything else should carry very little weight or significance. So like I said, this presents an opportunity for us to make the process a lot more objective and bias free. The third one, and this one is particularly close to my heart, and I think we have a session about this later in the day today as well. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. In my opinion, DEI is not just a social imperative, but a business imperative. What that means is we don't have to focus on diversity and inclusion because it's a social topic. We have to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion because it's a business need. There are countless studies and statistics out there that show that diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams. But I don't think that we really needed outside data to tell us that. Any of us who worked in diverse teams have at our own workplaces experienced that. When people from different walks of life with different perspectives come into a discussion, they bring those different viewpoints. And in order to arrive at the right solution, you don't need one great idea or two great ideas. You actually need 30 or 40, 50 different good, bad, great, poor ideas. And from that, you come out with, one or two great things. So what I'm trying to say is you cannot engineer the process of coming at the right solution by just picking one or two people who you think are the best, most suited for the job, because then they will have a tunnel vision. They will only think one way. And today's world is so much more dynamic. If we as organizations are building solutions that cater to people with thousands of ethnicities, with thousands of languages, then why should the people building these solutions come from just a handful of ethnicities and speaking a handful of languages? It just doesn't make sense. And DEI has been a topic that's been talked about for many years, but despite all the rhetoric, the numbers still paint a sorry picture. It's high time. So let's look at some of the numbers. Just less than 8% of core IT workers in the US are of African American origin. Only one out of four jobs in the industry, in the IT industry, are held by a woman. And what's even more surprising is only one third of women older than 35 still hold junior positions. And lastly, candidates coming from Ivy schools are twice as likely to get through the recruiting process, irrespective of skills. So we've been speaking about DEI for years now, but numbers haven't changed. It is super important, it is super critical that we take a scientific approach to this challenge and commit to creating a grassroots level change and not just focus on the optics. So I think the biggest problem has been that leaders all across the globe who've been talking about diversity and inclusion have mostly looked at optics. Can I do something that I can take to the media and say that I'm also doing something about it? But that is just not enough. And in my opinion, the way to tackle DNI is not by just focusing on sourcing. It's a very easy cop out by saying diversity and inclusion is a pipeline problem. There's only so much that we can do. Yesterday, I was reading an article, I think, on Forbes, and there is the CEO of one of the largest banks in this country who said that they do not have enough diverse employees because it's a pipeline problem. But there can be nothing further from the truth. It's not just a pipeline problem, but it is about objectively assessing the recruitment process for all kinds of unconscious biases that exist in the system. We have biases in us so deeply rooted that even the most educated, the most liberal people will be surprised to see those biases actually manifest in their real life. It's not that they're consciously doing it. When you tell them and when they see that and when they're shocked, they actually cannot believe that they were thinking about it like this. But that's the problem. It is an unconscious bias. It's not something that a lot of us do consciously. It's just the way we have grown up. It's just the way we have seen things in our society. So to change something, we first have to, like they say, what doesn't get measured doesn't improve. So if we really want to change something here in terms of diversity and inclusion, we first need to measure it. We need to take a metrics-based approach to measure inclusivity and diversity in all steps. And I'm just talking from a recruiting perspective right now, right from sourcing to screening and finally to interviews. And that's why I feel, COVID-19, I'm actually a lot more positive about the whole pandemic purely from a recruiting process, not commenting on the massive loss of life that has happened. But if you just look from a recruiting lens, I think we are going to come out smarter. We are going to come out better after this pandemic, because what the move to a virtual recruiting process does is it allows you to measure things at all stages. Traditionally, interviews have been the biggest choke point for unconscious bias. You could create a wider sourcing funnel. So you try and tackle the pipeline problem, whatever there is. One can even put in checks and balances when it comes to your screening. Say, for instance, there is a concept of blind resume screening where you don't really look into the PII and just make decisions based on the skills that people have. While in complete transparency, if there is a human doing it, there is still some level of bias that's going to creep in. But the biggest problem comes at the interviewing stage, and that's when our unconscious biases get magnified and get manifested. But with COVID, all interviews are remote. And that presents us an opportunity to not only measure the interview quality and analyze it for any kind of biases, but also to reduce unconscious bias. So if you are, in the recruiting team, talent acquisition team, thinking about diversity and inclusion, I think the first thing that you need to do is to see how you can extract data out of your recruiting or interviewing process and use that data to measure metrics like what's the pass through rate for diverse candidates. For example, uh, is there a pattern between diverse candidates being rejected versus non-diverse candidates being rejected? And there are tons of metrics like that one could talk about. Like I said, that would require a discussion on its own. But like I said, it's an opportunity for us to actually measure it and reduce that unconscious bias. Only by restructuring our processes in light of DNI, we can aim to make a real difference. So it's been and that's more from a metrics and the process perspective. There's obviously the problem of of pipeline. While I don't agree pipeline is the only problem when it comes to diversity and inclusion, but yes, pipeline is some sort of a problem. And it's not a problem because there are not enough candidates out there who come from diverse backgrounds. It's a problem because we do not source wide enough. We do not go to sources that potentially could give us more diverse candidates. So the second most important aspect when it comes to tackling DEI is to source from a diverse candidate funnel. And with this whole move to remote working and remote hiring, we truly have that opportunity to widen our funnel. I think we've spoken about it long enough as a problem. It's time we made some real progress. And with that, I'm coming to the last part of my presentation today. As a recruiting team, for you, it's not just about hiring the right person, but it's also important to create a journey for your employees from hiring right to their employment as they grow within their career at your organization. With the whole move, with the rapid digital transformation, digital skills are evolving at a very fast pace. Technologies that were in fashion 3 years ago are probably not fun anymore, and people have moved on to new tech. So what that means is, from a tech workforce perspective, you need to continuously upgrade, reskill, upskill your workforce. And while a lot of us have these learning platforms and contents and courses that we have put into place, I think there is a need to build a better self-guided learning path that not only offers suitable content to the employees, but also helps them to understand how they're really progressing. If I feel I need to improve my skills on, say Python, I'm just taking an example. Can I first benchmark myself and see where do I stand today, and then jump into the learning journey? And as I'm learning, going through that journey, are there checkpoints where I can check in and see how my progress is? So I think it's time that we move to a self-paced learning journey that gives feedback to employees in real time. And of course, that data is also useful for employers. So with that, I come to the end of our discussion today. Just to quickly recap, some of the trends that have become imperative today are recruiting has irreversibly become remote first, so we need to adapt our processes to it. We must move to a skill-based recruiting process, otherwise we will not be able to tap into the best talent which is available out there. DEI is not just a social imperative, but a business imperative. And it really requires us to take a scientific approach, to look at metrics, to evaluate our processes, and then bring in a real change. And finally, it's not just about hiring the right people, it's ensuring that they continue to grow once they're in the organization. With that, I come to the end of our discussion today. We have something exciting lined up for you towards the end of the event today. We have a big announcement coming up, so please stay tuned. And I enjoyed this discussion, this presentation. With that, we'll now open up to questions. And folks, even if you don't have questions right now, these questions can be put to us at any point in time. We'll be monitoring these questions, and we can answer it. And also, I see that we've ended from the scheduled time a few minutes sooner, so that gives you an opportunity to go into the networking lounge, go to the tables, and network with other people. So there's a question that has come in: will AI take over the role of recruitment? I think AI is an enabler, and it cannot replace or it cannot substitute for humans. Recruiting, in my opinion, the most important aspect of recruiting is the human interaction. It's when you talk to a person, you try and understand what this new role means to them. You try and understand what are their aspirations, where do they want to work, and I don't think those things can be done through AI. AI can supplement or replace our manual work. It can help us to screen faster through resumes. It can help us to conduct better interviews. It can help us to source better, but it can never remove the human out of the recruiting process. So there's a question which says, what type of AI is the most successful for in the landscape of recruiting? Um, I wouldn't put a finger on any specific AI component. I think technology has to cut across the three major processes, steps of recruiting process: sourcing, screening, and interviewing. In sourcing, there's only one objective of technology: can I tap into talent pools that were earlier unavailable or not visible to me? When it comes to screening, it's all about removing the bias out of the process and ensuring that no matter how wide is the top of your funnel, you still are making sure that you get through the most relevant candidates through your screening process. Because of course, if today you're sourcing 100 people, tomorrow you start sourcing 500 people for the job, and you want to still maintain the same time to close and same time to hire, there's something has to change in the recruiting process. Otherwise, it will not happen. So that's where technology comes into perspective from a screening process. And finally, I think when it comes to interviewing, and that's where we haven't really done a lot when it comes to AI and technology. I do believe there is an opportunity for software to make the entire interview experience better, to make the entire interview experience more objective. The fact is, a lot of us humans are poor at interviewing. It doesn't come naturally to us. We take interviews instinctively, whereas you need to take interviews consciously, based on skills, based on the right principles, and that's where there is a future that I believe is possible, where technology guides us in taking the right kind of interviews. Of course, we would still be doing those interviews, but it is guided by technology in such a manner that our interviews are more objective and more relevant. So I think those are some of the areas where technology and AI would cut into. So this is a question: how to take any recommendation on how to get passive candidates to take the time to do a skill assessment? It's a valid question. We've kind of discussed, thought about this with our customers over the years because that's what we do. I think it's all about how you position it to your candidates. If the candidate is going to see this assessment as another step in the already long interview process, then of course they are going to be discouraged. They don't want. They're already spending probably 7 to 8 hours or even more in certain instances to go through the interview. And now we are asking them to add another step, which is taking an hour or 2 long hour assessment. And the worst part is there is absolutely no they do not know what will happen if they invest these 1 or 2 hours in doing that assessment, right? That's where the problem is. But if you make that entire process more personal, if you spend that time in your initial recruiter phone screen explaining to the candidate why do you have an assessment process, and more importantly, if they go through an assessment process, it is most likely going to reduce the time that they would have to spend on interviewing, and that's what we recommend to all our customers. If you are using an assessment and not reducing at least 1 hour of interview, then you're not doing justice to the tool that you're putting in place, and you're not doing justice to your talent pool. So an assessment gives you a very strong signal of one's competency. I would even go to the extent to say, why not shorten the interview cycle by at least 2 interviews? So now that's one plus for the candidate because they have to go through lesser interviews. The second thing is you have to also explain it to them that if they're doing an interview, they are talking to a person, and like we said, at the end of the day, there's always some kind of bias that creeps in. But when they're doing an interview, they are doing it at their own convenience, at their own homes, and they are doing it in an environment that they're most comfortable with. So, for example, on HackerEarth, we provide them an ID experience that they're already used to when doing it on their own systems. Now, compare that with doing writing code on a whiteboard or trying to explain code in a conversation. Extremely difficult, right? But contrast that with writing code on an IDE. That's what they do every day. So it's not just about reducing the time to hire, but it's also providing them a better interview experience or a better recruiting experience. And lastly, and we have some data and studies to back this up. We actually saw, we did an adverse impact study for our assessments, and we saw that diverse candidates felt that an objective assessment process like this was positively biased towards them, because it kind of make that process objective, and at least right at the top there is no human bias coming into the process. So if you kind of position all of these things the right way to your candidates, I don't see any reason why they would not take up an assessment. So there's another question which says, do you think behavioral interviews and critical incident interviews will always be required? I don't think there's any assessment for any role that's always required. It really depends on the role and the job to be done. If your job to be done, or the position that they're going to come into requires the person to go through an extensive behavioral assessment, then you would do that. For example, in all leadership roles, you want to make sure that the person coming in as a leader has the right traits that your organization needs. And I think some sort of assessment there in terms of behavioral is very important. Uh, Roles which require a lot of cross-team collaboration, roles which are customer-facing roles. So you really need to pick and choose what roles you are hiring for, and then put in those required assessments. What are your views on having multiple layers of interviews at leadership level, as it makes most of the candidates uncomfortable at that level? Can we use better and structured process? I think, and we do that a lot. Obviously, the number of interviews actually increase as you go higher up, because the positions are high value. A wrong decision at that level can be costly, and one needs to make sure that they make the right decision. I think it's again comes down to how you position it. Uh, it's not just at senior positions. It's not just that you are trying to understand the person, but even the other person is trying to understand what kind of organization this is. Because at senior positions, you're not changing your role that often. You're probably going to spend the next 4 or 5 years building out a career in that position, and you want to make sure it's the right career move for you. And hence, it's important that people that you kind of position it that way. If it is positioned as an interview where you don't really care about the candidate and you're not selling them in that interview process, then of course they're not going to be comfortable. But if the interview is positioned as a conversation that you are doing not just to understand how good that candidate is, but for that candidate to also understand what it means to work at your organization, I think then senior folks will be much more comfortable going through extensive interviewing. Okay, so it looks like we've come to the end of the questions. So with about 5-10 more minutes. Okay, there's one more, which is, what are the best mode of assessment when it comes to lateral hiring in today's time? So not very clear what that question means, but I'll still try to answer it based on my understanding. So there are two ways to look at assessments. One is assessments are used as a way to screen out candidates who are probably not aligned or fit to that role. And then there are assessments which are used as selection criteria based on which you would possibly make a hiring decision. So your assessments which are used for screening out have to be shorter, uh, and they have to be done much more earlier in the recruitment process. It cannot be done at a late stage because, like I said, you're using it to screen out candidates. It also has to be designed such that you're conscious of a person's time. So any assessment which is like 2 hours, 3 hours long at that stage doesn't make sense. Uh, an ideal duration would be between 45 to 60 minutes maximum. When it comes to assessments being used as a selection criteria, what that means is you will hire a person based on the score or based on the performance on the test. That's where you could dive into much deeper assessments. But then you should also be conscious that if you're expecting the candidate to probably spend 6-8 hours going through an assessment, then they should really be further along in that interview process. You cannot use in-depth assessments as a screening criteria because that's just unfair for the candidate. In terms of modes, obviously today everything has to be virtual. Keep in mind the candidate experience. Be conscious of the person's time. Communicate effectively. The worst thing in recruiting is to put a candidate into a black hole, where they've applied, they don't know when they're going to get a result. They've taken a test, but they don't know when they're going to hear back from you, and that's when people start getting frustrated. How are we going to avoid proxy candidates during remote interview process? So in terms of assessments, there are obviously tons of proctoring tools that are built into into our platform at least. We could even take snapshots and then match them for any kind of suspicious activity. And in our experience, that has actually reduced cheating or misrepresentation to like zero point 0.0, zero point 0.05, 0.01% kind of rates. And there's like there'll always be some way humans will find out a way to figure to game a system, but in our opinion that's good enough. That eliminates most of the misrepresentation cases. In terms of interviews, if you're doing a live interview face to face, I think you'll figure it out. It's not that hard. I mean, like it's hard to pull off a 45-minute conversation where you're not speaking or someone else is prompting responses to your into your ears. Looking at tenure, if a candidate only stays for about 2 to 5 years at the organization, do we continue recruiting for culture fit or just technical fit? I actually, I actually want to answer that question in another way. I don't think there should be any round which is around culture fit, because if you're trying to fit the person into your culture, then you're essentially saying no to, in some sense, diverse candidates. You are saying that this person has to be like us, otherwise we're not going to hire that person. I think if there has to be any culture rounds, those rounds have to be around culture add. Can this person come into the organization and add to our culture rather than can they fit to our culture? So I'm not sure if that was the intent of the question. Definitely do technical fit interviews, but don't try to fit people into the culture that you already have. Otherwise, you will never get people who can actually make your culture better. So I think that was the last question for the session. With that, we will now end this particular keynote and move into the networking session. So please feel free to take the tables and discuss and talk to each other. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the event.